What was supposed to be a relaxing family vacation turned into a nightmare when my dad, Douglas, revealed a shocking secret he had been hiding for years. At first, it looked like he was just being petty with old grudges, but then his revenge exploded in front of everyone. The unexpected revelation left us speechless, and the fallout nearly tore our family apart forever. So, a little backstory before I get into the full drama. My dad, Douglas 50, has always been the quiet but calculating type. He's not the loud, dramatic parent that's usually my mom, Linda 48. But when Dad does speak up, he's the kind of guy who drops one-liners that sting harder than a slap. This summer, we all decided to take a family vacation together. Me, I'm 22, my younger sister, Emily 19, Mom and Dad. We rented a beach house in Croatia. Gorgeous ocean views, warm breeze, everything set up to be the perfect family getaway. Except it wasn't. From the first night, there was tension. Mom kept making these passive-aggressive comments toward Dad, like, well, some of us actually know how to plan ahead whenever something went wrong, even if it wasn't his fault. Emily rolled her eyes at everything, like she was too cool to even be there. I mostly stayed quiet, but I could tell Dad was bottling things up. On the third day, things escalated. We were sitting on the terrace overlooking the water when my uncle Rick, Dad's older brother, 53, showed up. Yeah, out of nowhere. Nobody had mentioned he'd be joining us, and the second Mom saw him, her face dropped. Douglas, you didn't say Rick was coming, she said sharply, setting her drink down. Dad just smirked. I didn't think it mattered. Family vacation, right? The vibe shifted instantly. Mom went pale, Emily got uncomfortable, and I felt this weird pit in my stomach. Dad and Rick have a complicated history of business disagreements, money fights, years of not speaking. But apparently Dad had invited him without telling anyone. That night, at dinner, Dad kept steering the conversation toward old times. He'd bring up moments where Rick accidentally outshined Mom, or when Rick got the promotion Dad was denied years ago. The way he did it felt intentional, like he was twisting a knife slowly. At one point, Mom snapped, "Why are you dragging up the past? Douglas, can we not ruin this trip?" Dad leaned back, calm as ever, and said, "Some things deserve to come to light eventually." The table went dead silent. Rick looked nervous, Mom looked furious, and Emily whispered to me, "What the hell is going on?" By day 5, it was clear Dad wasn't just trying to have fun. He was orchestrating something. He'd disappear for hours, then come back with the satisfied look on his face. Mom kept trying to confront him, but he'd brush her off with lines like, "Patience, all in good time." That good time finally came during a family barbecue on the last night. Dad stood up, clinked his glass, and said, "There's something you all need to know about this family, about what's been kept from you." I swear the air froze around us. Mom's hands clenched so tight around her fork, I thought it might snap. And that's when the real drama started. When Dad clinked his glass, we all thought maybe he was going to make a corny toast about her family unity or something. But nope. The man went straight for the jugular. "Linda," he said, staring at my mom, "you've been lying to our kids for years." And Rick, he nodded toward his brother, "You've been part of it." My jaw literally dropped. Emily muttered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Mom tried to laugh it off. "Douglas, stop being dramatic. You're embarrassing yourself." But Dad didn't flinch. He pulled a small envelope from his pocket, slapped it on the table, and slid it across. "Go ahead, Linda. Tell them what this is before I do." The tension was suffocating. Mom's hand shook as she pushed it back. "Not here. Not like this." "Exactly here. Exactly like this." Dad shot back. Rick stood up, clearly panicking. "Doug, you're out of line. This isn't the place." Dad's voice got colder. "Sit down, Rick. You've had your turn." I couldn't take it anymore. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" He looked at me and Emily, his expression softening just a little. "You deserve the truth. Your mother and your uncle," he pointed straight at Rick, "have been keeping a secret from you since before Emily was even born." Emily's face went white. "What secret?" Mom started crying, saying, "Douglas, please, don't do this here." And then Dad dropped it. The words just hum there, like a grenade had gone off in slow motion. Emily gasped so loudly it sounded like she choked. I sat frozen, staring at Mom, waiting for her to deny it. But she didn't. She just buried her face in her hands. "You've got to be kidding me," I whispered. "Tell me this isn't true." Rick finally blurted, "It was a mistake, okay? It was decades ago." Dad cut him off. "Decades ago, and yet my wife pretended it never happened, my brother pretended it never happened, and now sat here, raising a family, going on vacations, pretending we're normal." Emily stood up so fast her chair toppled. "Wait, are you saying?" She pointed at Rick, trembling. "Are you saying he might be my dad?" Mom sobbed harder. Dad didn't say yes or no, he just looked at her, stern-faced. That silence was worse and worse. I felt like my brain short-circuited. "You've known this, all these years?" I asked Dad. He nodded once. "I've known, and I've been waiting for the right moment. This," he gestured around the table, "is my moment." Mom screamed, "You're doing this for revenge. You don't care about them. You just want to humiliate me." Dad's voice cracked, but he didn't back down. "No, Linda, I want them to know who you really are." Emily stormed off toward the beach, sobbing. I sat there, shaking, trying to piece together my entire life. And Dad just stood, calm in the chaos, like this was the victory he'd been planning all along. After Dad's bombshell, the atmosphere at the beach house was toxic. I mean, you could literally feel it hanging in the air, thick like fog. Mom sat in the corner, silently crying into her beach towel. Rick paced back and forth, muttering, "This is insane, Doug, seriously," but Dad didn't budge. He just leaned against the railing, arms crossed, watching the chaos he'd created. I followed Emily down to the beach. The sun was setting, painting the water in pinks and oranges, but none of it felt beautiful. Emily was sitting on the sand, knees to her chest, and I crouched next to her. Are you really my dad? She whispered, tears streaking her face. I don't know, I admitted. I mean, Dad hinted at stuff, but he never actually said it, and now. My voice cracked. I don't even know what to believe anymore. She shivered. I hate this. I hate all of it. Vacation was supposed to be fun, and now everything's ruined. Meanwhile, back at the terrace, Dad was still having it out with Mom and Rick. I could hear snippets. You think you can just erase the past? Pretend none of this happened? Dad's voice was low, dangerous. Mom's sobs turned into shouts. Douglas, this isn't revenge, this is cruel. Rick tried to intervene. Doug, come on, think about the kids, you're destroying them. Exactly, Dad snapped, turning toward the house. They deserve the truth, and you've been lying to them their entire lives. I could feel my anger bubbling, mixed with confusion. Dad had a right to be upset, maybe even justified in feeling betrayed, but the way he executed this revenge was brutal. The whole family was unraveling, and it was happening in front of strangers who were probably walking past, wondering why the heck there were screams coming from a fancy vacation rental. That night dinner was silent. Everyone avoided each other like we were living with ghosts. Emily refused to sit at the table. Mom stared at her plate like it might answer questions, and Dad, well, he just stared at the ocean. I finally confronted him. Dad, why like this? Why not just talk? I asked, voice shaking. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sighed and said, because they needed to see the consequences of their lives, I needed to show them that secrets have weight, that actions have repercussions. I'm not proud of making it public, but sometimes the truth can't wait. I wanted to argue, to tell him he'd gone too far, but deep down I understood. Not fully, but enough to see why he planned it this way. Emily finally came back inside, face streaked with tears, and sat quietly. The tension didn't disappear, but there was a strange respect in the air. Dad had delivered his truth, unflinching, and now everyone had to process it. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. The vacation we'd imagined to last, the sun, the relaxing days was gone, replaced by something raw, uncomfortable, but undeniably real. Dad's revenge had hit hard, and nothing about our family would ever feel the same again. The next morning, the tension in the house was unbearable. Nobody spoke much, but the looks exchanged were enough to know that everything had shifted permanently. Dad was in the kitchen, making coffee with a calmness that felt almost terrifying. Mom sat at the table, scrolling on her phone, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Rick was pacing on the balcony, muttering to himself about lawyers and reputations. I finally confronted Dad in private. Are you happy now? I asked, trying not to let my voice break. He didn't look at me. He just poured his coffee and said, happy, no, but relieved. The truth is out, and they can't pretend anymore. I groaned. This isn't just about the truth, it's about revenge. You planned this entire vacation around humiliating Mom and Rick. Dad sighed. Maybe I did, but don't mistake what I did as cruelty. It's justice, you'll understand one day. Before I could respond, a commotion started on the terrace. Mom had finally confronted Dad and Rick together, and it was explosive. You think showing up like this, and dragging everything out, will fix anything? Mom yelled. You're tearing this family apart. Dad stood tall, voice low and steady. I'm not tearing us apart. I'm giving us a chance to rebuild without lies. The foundation of this family was cracked the moment secrets started controlling our lives. Rick shook his head, running a hand through his hair. Douglas, you're crossing a line. This isn't how families handle issues. You're being obsessive. Dad's eye snapped at him. Obsession? You had decades to run up, and you didn't. I waited. I planned. And now the truth is out. Deal with it. Mom screamed, her voice breaking. And what about the kids? You think this is fair to them? Emily, who had been standing silently near the railing, suddenly spoke up, her voice trembling but loud. Mom, Dad, enough. I don't care who did what anymore. I can't deal with fighting anymore. Her words cut through the shouting like a knife. Dad and Mom paused, staring at her. Rick looked stunned, as if realizing for the first time that Emily's perspective mattered. Dad's shoulders relaxed slightly. You're right, but some things had to be said. Some things had to be faced. Mom wiped her tears, shaking her head. Douglas, I hate you right now, but I guess we all needed this reckoning, no matter how brutal. The rest of the day was quiet, but in a different way. The air was heavy with the aftermath, but at least there were no more outbursts. Dad spent hours walking along the beach alone, deep in thought. Mom stayed in her room, occasionally peeking out to watch the waves. Emily and I finally had a long talk about everything, trying to process the reality of the situation. By evening, I realized something. Dad's revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about forcing the family to confront truths we'd all been avoiding. Painful? Absolutely. But necessary. And while the vacation was technically ruined, there was a strange clarity that came with knowing the full picture. The next few days were quieter, almost eerily so. The initial shock of Dad's revelation had passed, but the tension lingered like a stubborn shadow. We stayed in the house mostly, avoiding crowded tourist spots, but even silence felt loaded with unspoken words. Dad spent a lot of time alone, walking along the shore at dawn. I joined him one morning, curious and cautious. The sky was pale pink, the water calm, yet I couldn't shake the heaviness in the air. Dad. I started, unsure how to phrase what I felt. Do you think what you did was worth it? He didn't answer immediately. He watched a flock of gulls skim the water. I don't know, he admitted. It was brutal, yes, but hiding the truth, pretending everything was fine, that would have been worse. One day, you and Emily will understand why I chose this path. I nodded slowly, not fully understanding, but sensing the weight of decades of unspoken pain he carried. Later that day, Mom finally approached me. She looked exhausted, hair slightly damp from the shower she'd just taken. Dad, I hate that he did it this way, she said quietly, but I can't deny the truth. I was wrong to keep it from you two. I thought I was protecting you. I could see the regret etched in her face. We get it, Mom. It just hurts. Everything hurts. Emily, surprisingly, was the first to try and bring some normalcy back. She convinced us all to go snorkeling near the cliffs. The ocean was crystal clear, the sunlight piercing through the water in golden shafts. For a few hours, at least, we could pretend life wasn't fractured. Dad floated near us, surprisingly calm, watching Emily and me laugh as we chased small schools of fish. Even Mom managed a small smile. There was still tension, but moments like these felt like tiny bridges being built across the rift. That evening, we had a family dinner in the terrace. Nobody shouted, nobody screamed. Dad finally spoke, voice gentle, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry for the way I revealed everything," he said. "I went about it in my own unorthodox way, but I hope you can all see why it had to happen." Mom nodded, her own voice soft. "I'm sorry too. I never wanted to hurt you kids. I just made mistakes." Rick stayed longer than usual at night, quietly apologizing for his part in the chaos. The tension didn't disappear completely, but for the first time, it felt like we were facing it together instead of letting it fester. Later, sitting on the balcony with Emily, we watched the sunset. She leaned on my shoulder, sighing. "Do you think things will ever go back to normal?" she asked. I shrugged. "I don't think they'll ever be exactly the same, but maybe we can make a new kind of normal, one where we actually know the truth." For the first time that week, I felt a flicker of hope. Dad's revenge had been harsh, but it forced honesty. And maybe, just maybe, that honesty was the first step toward healing. By the last full day of our vacation, the house felt different. It wasn't perfect, there were still moments of awkward silence, stolen glances, and unspoken tensions. But it was quieter, calmer. Like the storm had passed and now we were left with the ruins to rebuild from. Dad decided to take us all on a short boat trip along the coast. The sky was clear, and the water sparkled under the sun. For once, I felt like maybe this trip could end on a positive note. Emily was chatting with Rick about snorkeling spots, surprisingly friendly. Rick seemed more relaxed, and even Mom smiled at him briefly, not fully, but enough to signal she was beginning to let go of her anger. Dad steered the boat himself, his hands firm on the wheel. He didn't say much, but I could tell he was observing everything, evaluating every interaction. At one point, Dad turned to me. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," he said quietly. "Don't let secrets and lies weigh you down like they did me." I blinked, caught off guard. "Thanks, Dad. I guess I understand a little more now why you did what you did." He nodded. "Sometimes revenge isn't about hurting someone, it's about making them see the truth. That's all I ever wanted." Later, Mom approached the two of us, her expression soft but tired. "I'm not proud of the choices I made," she admitted. "But I want to really try, to rebuild trust with you kids, and even with Douglas." Emily leaned against the railing, looking at the horizon. "I don't know if I'll ever stop feeling betrayed," she said. "But I do want things to get better, somehow." The boat drifted silently for a few moments, everyone lost in their thoughts. There was no shouting, no accusations, just reflection. For the first time, I realized that maybe Dad's plan, brutal as it was, forced us all to confront uncomfortable truths instead of pretending they didn't exist. As we returned to the beach house, Dad suggested we have one last family dinner before leaving. This time it was calmer. No tension-filled glances, no hidden agendas. Conversations were short but meaningful, filled with small apologies and tentative laughter. Rick even cracked a joke about a seagull stealing his sandwich, and we all laughed genuinely this time. After dinner, I sat on the terrace with Dad. "So revenge worked?" I asked, half joking. He chuckled softly. "I wouldn't call it that anymore. It was more a revelation, and maybe now we can finally move forward without lies hanging over us." I nodded, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't expected. The vacation hadn't been perfect, far from it, but it forced honesty, confrontation, and, oddly enough, a chance to rebuild. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the water, I realized something profound. Sometimes the most painful truths are the ones that free you the most. And for our family, this revelation, as devastating as it was, might just be the beginning of a new chapter. The last morning of our vacation arrived with a quiet sense of anticipation. The air smelled of salt and sunscreen, the waves slapping gently against the shore, and for the first time in days, the house didn't feel like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Dad was up early, packing the boat and securing gear. Mom made breakfast in silence, but there was a softness in her movements, a subtle effort to show calm. Emily and I grabbed towels and walked along the beach, letting the sand sift between our toes. "I think things are going to be okay," Emily said cautiously. "I mean, they'll never be the same, but maybe okay." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, Dad's weird revenge vacation actually forced everyone to be honest, painful, but necessary." Emily shook her head, laughing bitterly. "You really make it sound like an epic plan, like a movie." I shrugged. "Well, it kind of was. Dad's dramatic like that." When everyone finally gathered for the farewell breakfast, the atmosphere was tentative but lighter. Dad made a toast. To honesty, he said simply. To facing the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, and to family, the messy, imperfect kind that we all have. Mom raised her glass, eyes misty. To family. Even Rick, surprisingly, added a quiet to family. We ate breakfast in a calm rhythm, small talk about plans for returning home, the flights, who would drive through. It felt almost normal, a fragile normalcy that had taken days of upheaval to reach. Before leaving, Dad pulled me aside. "I know this trip wasn't easy, but remember this, secrets fester, lies grow. Confront them early, be honest, even when it hurts." I nodded. "I get it, Dad, really." Emily hugged Dad tightly. "Thanks for being honest, even if it hurt." He hugged her back, and I saw a flicker of pride in his eyes. The man who had orchestrated this calculated revelation had also created a path toward reconciliation. Packing the car, I caught a final look at the beach house, the cliffs, the ocean glinting under the morning sun. This vacation had been nothing like we expected. There was no sun-soaked laughter or Instagram-perfect moments. Instead, it had been raw, emotional, and transformative. As we drove away, the air inside the car was quiet, reflective, but lighter than when we arrived. Mom reached over and squeezed Dad's hand. Emily leaned on my shoulder, and I looked out the window, thinking about what we had endured and survived together. Dad's revenge, brutal and unflinching, had forced the family to confront long-buried truths. And now, leaving Croatia behind, we carried a newfound awareness, messy, painful, but real. For the first time in a long while, I believed we could rebuild. Not perfectly, not without scars, but with honesty. And somehow that felt like hope. We didn't know what the future would hold, but we knew this: secrets could no longer control us. And in that sense, Dad's vacation, and terrifying as it had been, had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations.